A snow-dusted evening in Vienna, 1953. Lieutenant Colonel Pyotr Popov approaches the checkpoint between Soviet and American zones, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. In his coat pocket, a letter that will change everything. But here's what haunts intelligence historians to this day. Was Popov truly the victim of a honey trap, as Soviet records claim? Or was he something far more dangerous, a man who willingly traded his homeland's secrets for forbidden love? The woman who destroyed him left no trace in official records. Her name appears in exactly one document, then vanishes forever. The Americans claim they never heard of her. The KGB files tell a different story entirely. Tonight, we unravel the mystery of a spy who became a pawn in a game where everyone was playing chess while he was playing checkers, where the line between love and espionage dissolves into something that still puzzles intelligence agencies today. What really happened in that divided city? And why did it take the KGB 5 years to realize their greatest nightmare was hiding in plain sight? Don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe. You are not here by accident. Post-war Vienna resembled a chessboard where each square belonged to a different master. British, Soviet, American, and French zones carved up the Austrian capital like slices of a complicated pie. The boundaries between these sectors remained surprisingly porous, at least for those carrying the right documentation. Military personnel crossed these invisible lines daily, sometimes several times, with special stamps adorning their papers. The Cold War was still learning how to be cold. In the Soviet commandant's office, 1845 hours. A lieutenant colonel receives an envelope, plain, unremarkable. Inside, a brief note written on hotel stationery. Just a few words. 2045? Waiting. The final word is underlined twice in bright lipstick. Instead of a signature, the imprint of a woman's lips. But who was she really? American intelligence had been studying human psychology with the precision of scientists. They understood that passion could be weaponized, that loneliness could become a vulnerability, that even the most disciplined operative had pressure points waiting to be discovered. The operation they designed for Vienna was elegant in its simplicity. No technical gadgets, no elaborate disguises, just human nature, carefully orchestrated. Yet something went wrong from the very beginning. The woman they chose for the mission was never supposed to fall off their radar. Her disappearance would haunt American handlers for decades. January 1958. Russell Langell steps off the train at Belorusky Station, Moscow. Officially, he's nothing more than an administrative attaché, a bureaucrat handling the mundane details of embassy life. His file reads like a government clerk's resume. 36 years old, career diplomat, married with 3 children. But the first secretary of the embassy personally meets him at the station. This detail catches the attention of KGB watchers, who recognize the first secretary as a known intelligence operative. Langell immediately falls under surveillance. The Americans had learned a crucial lesson by the mid-50s. Technical intelligence, satellite photos, intercepted communications. None of this could penetrate the heart of Soviet power. They needed human sources, people with access to the most sensitive political and military information. They needed to grow spies from within. In 1958, the CIA possessed exactly one such asset. A man they had cultivated 5 years earlier when they caught him in the web of an impossible romance. For 5 years, they had kept him dormant, a sleeper agent building his cover, accumulating wealth that would have made him a millionaire by Soviet standards. Swiss bank accounts fattened with American dollars, the promise of eventual extraction to the land of the free. But was Popov really their willing collaborator? Or had he become something more dangerous, a double agent whose true loyalties remained hidden even from himself? Moscow, Prospect Mira. The American diplomat loved taking long walks through the city. Nothing suspicious in his movements, nothing that raised red flags among KGB surveillance teams. They were even considering reducing their monitoring. Then came June 22nd, 1958. L'Angel traveled to the Lenin Hills district, his first visit to this quiet area overlooking the Moscow River. He circled a specific location several times, making notes. His behavior immediately triggered suspicions among the watching eyes. By evening, KGB technicians had thoroughly searched the area. Concealed beneath a bridge, they discovered a dead drop. Tablets for invisible ink, a miniature camera, microfilm, instructions, and money. The question that kept KGB analysts awake that night: who was this cash intended for? What the KGB didn't know at the time was that Popov had first made contact by slipping a letter into the parked car of a United States diplomat in Vienna, offering to sell Soviet documents. His motivations ran deeper than simple greed. He seemed to be motivated by a deep anger at what he felt was government exploitation of the peasants of Russia, including his own family. The original letter, dated December 28, 1952, was written in Cyrillic. As translated later, it read, "I am a Soviet officer. I wish to meet with an American officer with the object of offering certain services. Time, 1800 hours. Date, January 1st, 1953. Place, Plankengasse, Vienna." This wasn't the behavior of someone blackmailed into cooperation. This was the calculated approach of a man who had made a deliberate choice to betray his homeland. Surveillance on L'Angel intensified. Multiple teams now tracked his every movement. Hidden cameras captured his daily routines. The KGB was building a comprehensive dossier, waiting for the crucial moment when someone would approach that bridge. But there was another mystery brewing. Among the hundreds of photographs and film reels documenting L'Angel's activities, one face kept appearing in the background, sometimes in civilian clothes, sometimes in the uniform of a Soviet Army lieutenant colonel. The breakthrough came through meticulous analysis of surveillance footage. Moscow, Prospect Mira, trolleybus stop near the metro station, 10:05 on the clock. An unknown officer in Soviet Army uniform stands waiting. L'Angel walks past. For just a moment, barely perceptible to casual observers, something passes between them. The officer boards a trolleybus heading to the Ostankino Hotel, where he spends the night. By morning, he's under constant surveillance. Ministry of Defense files revealed the identity: Lieutenant Colonel Pyotr Popov, born 1923, war veteran. From 1953 to 1957, he served in Germany and Austria, currently assigned as military representative in Kalinin. But there was something troubling in Popov's Austrian service record. Until the withdrawal of Soviet troops in 1955, Popov worked in Austria but had not managed to make a name for himself as a recruiter. He had been instructed to redirect his efforts to refugees and political émigrés from Eastern Europe who had settled in Vienna. This assignment placed him in direct contact with exactly the type of sources American intelligence was most interested in cultivating. Kalinin, a quiet city between Moscow and Leningrad. In the mid-50s, it had sprouted several classified facilities, secret research institutes working on defense projects and Soviet rocket development. Popov worked at one of these closed military enterprises. Such a man could indeed interest the new American resident in Moscow. But the KGB suspected something deeper. A cable from Berlin confirmed their worst fears. Russell Langell had made a brief trip to East Germany in 1957. No meeting with Popov was officially recorded, but intelligence agencies rarely document their most sensitive contacts. If such a clandestine meeting had occurred, the two men could have prearranged communication methods and meeting locations. The dead drop at Lennon Hills suddenly made perfect sense. However, the day after his contact with the American, Popov departed for Kalinin without approaching the bridge. His departure caught KGB surveillance completely off guard. What troubled Soviet counterintelligence most was how professionally Popov evaded their watchers, as if he had been specifically trained in such techniques. Later, CIA documents would reveal that Popov was never recruited in the traditional sense. He was what intelligence professionals call a walk-in, someone who volunteers their services. The CIA considered him incredibly valuable at a time when the US did not have access to the U-2 spy plane or other advanced technical intelligence gathering methods. Yet there was something unusual about Popov from the beginning. Unlike most double agents who continue their regular duties while secretly serving the enemy, Popov seemed to operate with unusual autonomy. He had his own ideas about which information was valuable and how to obtain it. In KGB files, he received the code name Judas, 1953. The woman's name appeared in Soviet intelligence reports as M. Mashtab, almost certainly a fabrication. According to Popov's handler reports, she worked as a typist in the Soviet commandant's office but lived in the American sector of Vienna. She crossed sector boundaries weekly to reach her workplace, sometimes retyping classified Soviet documents. Pyotr Popov noticed her on her very first day and escorted her to the sector boundary when her shift ended. "That's another country over there," she told him at parting. "You're not allowed to cross. Pity, or I would have invited you for coffee." For the first time, he gazed longingly beyond the barriers and barbed wire. Soviet personnel frequently crossed sector boundaries in 1953 and 54, with special notations made in their personal documents. Each crossing required a report explaining the purpose, but an unspoken rule existed. Having a valuable agent or informant on the other side exempted one from most formalities. Popov possessed no such privilege in 53. Everything changed unexpectedly. She needed to deliver a document urgently to the American zone and was assigned an escort. For the first time, he crossed the boundary without special permits or questions. Life was different in the American sector. Bright neon signs advertised restaurants and clubs. Cafes stayed open late, and lovers weren't asked for identification documents. They spent the night in her small apartment. When they said goodbye, she laughed. "Now you can list me as your agent, and then we can see each other more often." He returned after 2 days. From that moment, his official reports featured a new character, Agent Emma Mashtab. Meeting this valuable agent, Popov now crossed the boundary every other day. Yet he never provided any significant intelligence from this source. When superiors questioned the lack of results, Popov offered a simple explanation. "My agent is a woman. They're so unpredictable." This remark would later provide Soviet counterintelligence with a crucial lead. Vienna, Soviet intelligence headquarters. The search for M. Mashtab revealed hundreds of women registered under similar surnames, but none employed by the Soviet military administration. Investigators then searched for any typist who might have worked with Pyotr Popov in April 1953. They found her trail. According to documents, she resigned from the commandant's office in September 53 and departed Vienna. In October of the same year, she perished in an automobile accident. The pattern became clear. Popov could have been recruited by American intelligence services, and the woman was likely disposed of as an unnecessary witness. In such high-stakes games, loose ends were routinely eliminated. From Popov's later testimony under interrogation, he claimed the Americans blackmailed him, exploiting a poorly planned meeting with his agent. However, American sources suggest he initiated contact himself, approaching them with an offer to sell Soviet secrets for money. According to CIA documents, the first contact occurred on December 28, 1952, when Popov approached an American vice consul in Vienna and handed him a letter stating, "I am a Soviet officer. I wish to meet with an American officer with the object of offering certain services." If his collaboration with American intelligence began in '53, then half of Soviet intelligence networks in Europe had already been compromised by 1958. If it started earlier, during his first Western assignment, the Americans potentially knew everything about Soviet operations. The KGB needed answers. What specific information had Popov passed to the Americans? Which networks had been exposed? Which agents were now in danger? They devised a special operation. Rather than maintain external surveillance of Popov in Kalinin, they would place someone close to him, someone he would trust and confide in. In 1957, Popov had been expelled from military intelligence for unauthorized relationships with women. If this weakness was to be exploited, a woman would be the perfect operative for the task. KGB analysts studied Popov's psychological profile to determine what type of woman might appeal to him. They selected someone beautiful and athletic, exactly his preferred type. Moscow, Leningrad Station. She appeared in the train car just before departure to Kalinin. Popov even helped her with her luggage, immediately taking notice. Beautiful, athletic, cheerful, something about her seemed familiar to him. He was drawn to exactly this type of woman. Throughout the journey to Kalinin, they chatted pleasantly. She was a pedagogy student traveling to his city for practical training. She had rented a room on Nikolskaya Street. Popov laughed. "Then we'll be neighbors. I live on the same street." That evening, Pyotr Popov stood on Nikolskaya Street with a bouquet of flowers, ready to show the young woman from Moscow the nightlife of his provincial city. The next day, KGB leadership decided to remove external surveillance from Popov. Small cities like Kalinin weren't like Moscow. People were more noticeable and recognizable. A professional like Popov could easily detect surveillance. Now, only one person would monitor him: the beauty. The romance developed rapidly. Lieutenant Colonel Popov took his new acquaintance to local restaurants, spending money freely and generously. When she asked about his apparent wealth, he mentioned it was payment for his Secret Service work, though he didn't elaborate on what kind. For weeks, Judas made no suspicious moves in the beauty's presence. Popov seemed smarter than he appeared. According to the beauty's reports to KGB headquarters, this man lived an ordinary life of a Soviet civil servant in Kalinin. Nothing in his behavior raised suspicions. The KGB began to suspect that Judas sensed danger and was lying low, waiting for the surveillance to relax. Nearly a month after their first meeting, Popov invited his new friend to his apartment. She mentioned what a neighbor had told her. "But don't you live with your wife and children?" It turned out Popov maintained a second apartment in Kalinin, which he mysteriously called his place by the post office. The building indeed stood next to the postal service. From headquarters report, the second apartment of Judas is located at 21 Bakunin Street, Kalinin. He visits once monthly, on Saturdays or Sundays. During each visit, he invariably stops at the nearby post office. All postal correspondence addressed to Judas was placed under surveillance. Letters intended for him were intercepted, examined, and studied in KGB laboratories before delivery. The first letter arrived exactly 1 month after Popov's meeting with Langell in Moscow. On first glance, it appeared to be an ordinary family letter. Dear Pyotr Semyonovich, I wrote to you a month ago, but received no reply. I am very pleased with your work. You asked me for a loan. I'll send it immediately. Laboratory analysis revealed completely different text written in invisible ink. Our dear friend, we highly value your work and confirm the transmission schedule for Saturdays and Sundays. KGB headquarters initially assumed this was a message from Langell. They were wrong. The invisible text included an address for sending intelligence correspondence. It became clear that the Kalinin operative received assignments directly from CIA headquarters, almost bypassing Langell entirely. The American diplomat was merely one communication channel among several. Using a radio transmitter, Popov maintained direct contact with American intelligence centers in Germany. The transmitter was hidden in the Bakunin Street apartment that the beauty had helped locate. She also determined the exact timing of his radio transmissions. All communication channels seemed to be under control, but the KGB remained cautious. Popov might have additional methods they hadn't discovered. Not one of them could be allowed to function until he was completely exposed. The beauty had to remain close to him. He appeared to trust her, and she seemed to genuinely appeal to him. Both addresses were now monitored, but special attention focused on the Bakunin Street apartment. Soviet radio intelligence began monitoring airwaves carefully, particularly on Saturdays and Sundays. Within a month, the worst fears of Soviet counterintelligence were fully confirmed. From November 1958, Judas regularly transmitted encrypted messages. Broadcasts occurred Saturdays at 10 p.m. and Sunday mornings at 6:30. This pattern continued weekly. Sunday, December 22nd. After another radio session, Popov invited the beauty to a restaurant. He seemed serious and troubled. 5 minutes into their conversation, he made an unexpected proposal. "Marry me." "But you're already married?" "That doesn't matter. Just tell me yes or no. Meet me tonight at the corner of Mednikov Street, and we'll discuss it." She didn't appear for that meeting. That same day, Popov received a coded letter from Moscow indicating a meeting with Langell was scheduled for the following day. The super spy didn't want to travel to Moscow. He got intoxicated and appeared at her apartment on Nikolskaya Street. "Why didn't you come tonight? Though it doesn't matter now. Walk me to the station tomorrow morning. I want to see at least one beautiful face before I go." He spent the night at her place. In the morning, she accompanied him to the station. For the first time, she sensed something human in this man. She felt genuine pity for him. They would never meet again. One woman had recruited Popov for the Americans. Another woman had helped expose him to the Soviets. Moscow, Lubyanka. The decision to arrest Popov was made and canceled several times at the highest levels. Someone was calculating risks and potential gains. For KGB Chairman Alexander Shelepin, the Popov case represented a valuable opportunity. If American diplomat Langell could be caught red-handed, it would create an international scandal, exactly what the ambitious new chairman needed to boost his service's prestige. But capturing the American diplomat required catching him in the act. In this grand game, former GRU officer Pyotr Popov was merely a pawn, bait for Langell. January 1959. Popov was arrested aboard the Kalinin Moscow train and secretly transported to KGB internal prison. Senior investigator Ivan Zotov remembered his first encounter with the prisoner. Popov made an unpleasant impression, exactly what one would expect from a spy. Balding, with shifty eyes like a little mouse, Zotov recalled. He reminded me of the spy character from the Lenin in October film. But KGB Chairman Shelepin, after studying the American super asset, quickly reached a decision. This man would do whatever he was told if promised his life would be spared. What emerged during interrogation revealed the true scope of Popov's activities. For American intelligence services, this agent had been their most important source of information for 5 years. They had expected and received valuable intelligence of military and technical nature. The payments were substantial. Large sums were transmitted to him through various channels. For such information, as one CIA official later noted, nothing was too much to pay. Yet there was a curious detail that puzzled investigators. Despite his access to classified information and the substantial payments from his American handlers, Popov lived relatively modestly. In Soviet terms of the 1950s, what could he buy with foreign currency? Chocolate? Restaurant visits? Affairs with women? He kept his lifestyle deliberately unremarkable to avoid suspicion, even as his Swiss bank account accumulated what would have been considered a fortune by Soviet standards. Popov didn't deny the charges. From the beginning, he provided detailed accounts of his contacts with American intelligence, his recruitment in Austria, and how he had been ensnared through compromising material involving his relationship with a woman. "The Americans caught me through a woman," the former GRU officer insisted. January 1959. Popov remained in KGB internal prison, providing testimony. When he failed to appear for his scheduled meeting with American Embassy attaché Langell, the diplomat couldn't help but notice. However, he didn't yet know that his agent had been compromised and was giving testimony. Popov immediately agreed to work under KGB control. They transported him directly from internal prison to his first controlled meeting with the American diplomat. He was nervous. Everyone could see that. The prison smell lingered despite attempts to mask it with cologne. He had lost weight, but maintained his composure. Popov walked to the Aragvi restaurant on foot, while surveillance teams documented every detail with hidden cameras. He projected the image of a completely free and content man. The Aragvi restaurant on Tverskaya Street had a reputation during Soviet times as an important gathering place for political, scientific, and cultural elites. It specialized in Georgian and Caucasian cuisine and was exactly the kind of establishment where sensitive conversations could be conducted amid the ambient noise of clinking glasses and animated discussions. Langell arrived by car with his wife, not coincidentally. Cameras captured a subtle, almost invisible hand movement as the diplomat reached into his wife's pocket before entering the restaurant vestibule. Popov stood in the vestibule. Now the package was in his hands. The handoff was complete, everything recorded. Langell observed Popov, but detected no signs that his agent was operating under enemy control. The package passed to Popov would be opened and its contents photographed. It contained money and a new assignment. But there was something else that the KGB didn't expect. Popov, realizing this might be his last meeting as a free man, managed to pass his own message to his CIA handler. Hidden in what intelligence professionals call a cylindrical letter, a tiny rolled message concealed in an everyday object, Popov included information that would later be found to reference other Soviet intelligence operations. This final act of defiance occurred on September 18, 1959, in the men's room of the Aragvi restaurant. Despite being under KGB control, Popov had found a way to warn his American contacts about other compromised operations. The international spy scandal in Moscow in 1959 became inevitable. Pyotr Popov had performed his final role as bait brilliantly, but he had also managed one last gesture of loyalty to his American handlers. Though whether this was genuine loyalty or a desperate attempt to preserve some value for himself remained unclear even to CIA analysts who studied the case for decades afterward. October 16, 1959. The last meeting between Popov and Langell took place. During this encounter, KGB operatives detained the diplomat and transported him to Lubyanka. There, he was shown a brief documentary film about his difficult intelligence work in the Soviet Union, which Soviet counterintelligence had been compelled to produce. Any questions or comments in such circumstances would have been superfluous. From the official statement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, October 16th of this year, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs proposed that attaché of the United States Embassy in Moscow, Russell Langell, depart the country, as his actions were incompatible with the status of diplomatic personnel. The public exposure was necessary for KGB Chairman Alexander Shelepin, primarily to elevate his service's prestige in the eyes of Soviet political leadership. Regarding the fate of CIA super agent Pyotr Popov, the Soviet press reported nothing. Years later, CIA analysts would debate whether Popov had been worth the risk. Some argued that he never provided useful political intelligence, and the value of his military information remained questionable. He was most valuable for counterintelligence operations, but even there, his contribution to American security was limited. Yet newly uncovered documents from Lithuanian archives suggest a different perspective. These files indicate that the CIA might have been better off avoiding Popov entirely when he returned to Moscow in 1958. His presence may have compromised other operations that were far more valuable than anything he could provide. The files reference a figure known only as Zvezdenkov, whose involvement with Popov was first mentioned by Popov himself in that cylindrical letter he passed to Russell Langell in the Aragvi restaurant's men's room. This connection suggests that Popov's final message may have exposed an entire network that the KGB was unaware of. Intelligence historians now debate whether Popov was simply an opportunist who got in over his head, or whether he was a more complex figure, someone who maintained genuine loyalty to the Soviet system even while betraying it for personal gain. The Popov case established a template that intelligence services on both sides would follow for decades. It demonstrated that human intelligence remained irreplaceable despite advancing technology, but also that the human element introduced unpredictable variables that could destroy carefully constructed operations. Nikita Khrushchev personally signed the elimination order. Even Popov's wife approved the decision. "Judas," she said, "you shouldn't be shot. You should be hanged." KGB Chairman Shelepin did not honor his promise to spare Popov's life. For Alexander Shelepin, the Judas Popov case had already served its purpose in his rapid political ascent. For counterintelligence professionals, the most significant aspect of the case was different. For the first time since the war's end, their former wartime allies, the Americans, had begun actively working to infiltrate and recruit agents within the Soviet Union itself. This marked the true beginning of what historians would later call the intelligence war of the Cold War. A conflict fought not with armies or nuclear weapons, but with individual human beings willing to risk everything for money, ideology, or love. KGB investigator Ivan Zotov had the final conversation with the condemned super spy. Popov attempted to summarize his own life. "They bought me through women and greed. I was always susceptible to that. But in Kalinin, there was one girl who even ran to the station to see me off. Very beautiful and trustworthy face. Women did love me after all." the investigator remained silent. In Pyotr Popov's mind, love had played the tragic role in his life. He justified his betrayal of the homeland through love until his final moments. He was convinced that women and his uncontrollable passion for life were to blame for all his misfortunes. He was mistaken. His story wasn't one of love, but of betrayal, passion, and greed. The Popov case would be studied in intelligence academies on both sides of the Iron Curtain for decades. It became a cautionary tale about the dangers of allowing personal weaknesses to compromise professional obligations. But it also revealed something else. In the world of espionage, the line between victim and perpetrator, between patriot and traitor, is often thinner than those involved realize. The beautiful agent who helped expose Popov returned to Moscow after his arrest and disappeared from KGB records. Her real name remains classified to this day. The woman in Vienna who may have helped recruit him was officially reported deceased, but no grave was ever found. Russell Langell returned to the United States and continued his intelligence career, eventually serving in Latin America, where the lessons learned from the Popov case would prove invaluable. But in one thing, the condemned spy was correct. The world is indeed ruled by human desires, and in the shadows of intelligence services, those desires become both weapons and vulnerabilities that can topple empires or destroy individual lives with equal devastating precision. The Cold War had found its template for the battles ahead, not fought with tanks or missiles, but with the most dangerous weapon of all, the human heart.